Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Intro to SEL Power Skills and Career Success Workshop. My name is Jennifer Rhodes. I'm one of the career advisors here on the CPD team, and I'm so glad you've been able to take some time out of your day today to join me. Before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping items. Everyone has automatically been placed on mute to minimize any background noise, you really be able to focus on the content here. If you do have any questions or comments along the way, please do feel free to put those in the chat as I'll be monitoring those as we go along. And this session is being recorded, as you may have seen. Anyone who has RSVP'd for the session will be sent a copy of the recording as well as the PowerPoint. Usually it'll probably be early next week by the time we get this out to you, but you will be able to go back and review that material. So before we get started, I do like to get to know my audience just a little bit. So excuse me, if you could just type in what school you're from. And when I say school, I mean IT, business, education, healthcare, as well as what interests you about this topic and basically prompted you to RSVP for this session. All right, great. It looks like we have folks from all different schools. We have education, business, accounting, IT. Very good. Excellent. And again, just curious, what prompted you to register for this session? Okay, great. So I see like interested SER skills are essential. Very good. More career knowledge. Okay, Christina mentions I have an interview coming up. Working in HR. Esma says almost to graduation, getting ready to apply. Congratulations for seeing the end here coming up for you. That's great. Okay, and Bobby mentions I feel this may be a weak point for me when, like in terms of career success. Very good. I appreciate you, kind of talking about where you're at with this. Okay, so I see a few people mentioning skills for interviewing. I just to clarify, this session is, more about what are SEL power skills, which really remotes or relates more to emotional intelligence. So we're not really going to get into, say, like interviewing techniques or interviewing preparation. It's more, understanding what is SEL, what are SEL power skills, how might that be able to, how might you be able to use that to leverage your career? So just clarifying that as well. So we make sure everybody understands the content here as well. Oh my gosh, Bobby has an interview right after this. Well, I hope it goes well, Bobby. And Geetha mentions, if I pronounce that correctly, interview coming up as well. So I'm glad you folks are getting interviews. I mean, that speaks to your background and ability as well in your field. So that's really good to hear. So thank you all for sharing. Again, I'm Jennifer Rhodes. I'm one of the career advisors here on the CPD team. Just to give you a little bit about my background, I have been with WGU, just hit my 5-year mark in September. And I'm fortunate to have a remote position that allows me to split my time between Pennsylvania and Arizona. I am currently in Northwest Pennsylvania, looking forward to returning to some a little bit nicer weather here, hopefully in a couple weeks, even though we've had record-breaking warm temperatures here in Pennsylvania. So it's been a really interesting time here with the weather. But before I joined WGU, I worked for Arizona State University for a number of years, helping different individuals with career development, everyone from first-time freshmen to, career changers, PhD postdocs. I feel really fortunate to have been able to develop a wide range of career development experience. What I really enjoy is what I like to say is helping students to tell their career narratives. So helping them to understand, what their strengths, their challenges are, what their possibilities might be, and then be able to articulate that and essentially to make a plan. My background includes a master's in counseling. And so part of my role that I also enjoy is working with SEL, which stands for social emotional learning. It is right in alignment with some of the training that I have received in the past. And I also recently received the what's called the International Coaching Federation ACC credential, which is the first level coaching credential that you can earn. So all of this is kind of combined and really meets and is well aligned with my interests. So when we talk about this whole concept of SEL, stands for social emotional learning, emotional intelligence, EQ, these are all pretty much related, but definitely want to give you a little bit more of the background and, talk about, okay, what are the SEL power skills? How can you, once again, use these to your advantage in your career? And how can you continue to develop these as you go along? So we will talk about also what's called the NACE career competencies. NACE stands for the National Association of Colleges Employers. And the career competencies are basically the base level of what they believe you should possess for lifelong successful career development. We will also talk about how do the power skills fit into the workplace. We will have you do a very informal, brief self assessment of where you believe you lie in terms of competency with these power skills. What I'm going to do is have you kind of look over the list of them all and notate which ones you consider to be pretty much solid strengths or those that you might be able to work on. Then we will talk about ways to build up those power skills, and we will talk about next steps. I don't know if any of you have attended any of my workshops in the past. If you have, thank you for tuning in again. But essentially, I do like to give attendees what we call a 30-day challenge. The reason I do this is I like to give next steps for folks in terms of the material that they learn so that they can use it right away and so that it doesn't fall by the wayside. Because as we can probably all relate to, we go to a really interesting professional development session and we think, wow, there's some ideas that I would like to try out or I'd like to implement. And then days become weeks, weeks become months. Before we know it, several months have passed, and unfortunately, we haven't accessed that information. So, in order to encourage you to put this information to work right away, I would like to welcome you to participate in a 30-day challenge. And when we're looking at 30 days from now, my goodness, it's the 6th of November. So we would be looking at essentially the 6th of December. And what I'd like you to do is to think of 3 next steps that you're willing to commit to based on the information that you learned today. And, write those down and think about, is there a compatibility buddy that you could check in with to see if you were successful on that 30-day challenge? Once again, this will enable you to engage in the material right away and hopefully be able to get the most out of it. So for this brief icebreaker activity, I would like you to take a moment and think of a colleague or supervisor or other leader who you admire. And I'd like you to take a moment and write down um, 5 words which describe this person. So, for example, this could be a supervisor that you felt was really inspirational, and you might say one of the words might be inspiring that you write down that describes them. Or maybe we can use this a little loosely and we can say, servant leader could be a way to describe them. And that's technically 2 words for one description, but you can definitely be a little flexible with this. Or maybe it is someone who is, compassionate, resourceful, innovative. Just think about 5 words Once again, that would really describe that leader. Or it doesn't have to be a leader, it could also be a colleague that you really admire. Then, as you're documenting those 5 descriptive words, I would like you to consider um, basically what skills does this person possess that also helps you admire them. So this could be things like maybe they're really tech savvy, they're really great with technology. Maybe they are really knowledgeable about data. Maybe they make connections easily with others. So maybe it's their interpersonal skills that they're really able to tap into. Or maybe they're really well organized. Maybe they're really self aware. So I'm going to give you just about a minute to think about this. So again, you're thinking about 5 words used to describe the colleague, supervisor, or leader that you admire. And then thinking about 5 skills that you think they're strong in. So again, it could be relationship building, it could be their self-awareness, it could be their project management, data management, etc. So I'll give you a moment and then we'll check in. Okay, so Bobby, thank you for sharing here in the chat. It looks like Bobby mentioned compassionate, warm, relatable, resourceful, great communicator. Would anyone else like to share in the chat what they came up with, just so we can see what ideas you have? Okay, so Saritha mentions inspires, encourages, recognizes, social, coach. Very good. So what I'm trying to get you to observe here would be how many of those, whether they are descriptors or skill words, might relate to what we call emotional intelligence. Chances are you have at least 1 or 2 words in there that really do fall under what we call the EQ category or social emotional learning. And these really relate to an individual's ability to understand their own emotions and others' emotions, as well as how to effectively relate and connect to others. So you'll see words that were shared here like compassionate, warm, relatable, strong communicator, inspirational. Most times you will find that there are elements of EQ that are evident when you really pause and you think about a leader or colleague that you admire. And so it's really important, I would say, for us to pause and think about, you know, what are these traits we admire and how much of this is EQ? Because you will even find when someone is being hired, a lot of times we'll talk about, when I'm talking with students about job applications and the interview process and such. Yes, a degree is one piece of marketability. And yes, your experience is another piece of marketability. But when you are in a very competitive pool, a lot of times the differentiating factor that can get you hired has to do with something related to emotional intelligence. This is also what makes a leader exceptional as opposed to a good leader. And we'll talk a little bit more about the research behind that. So Jalissa also mentions, selfless, definitely EQ related, respected, passionate. Yes, absolutely. So yes, there are many of these factors that are EQ related that make someone a strong professional. So I do want to take a moment and talk about these what are called NACE career competencies. Now, NACE, if you haven't heard of them before, they are the organization, it's the National Association of Colleges and Employers. And the reason I'm introducing this to you is that these career competencies are also closely related to the SEL power skills. And NACE is a national organization that, you know, pretty much regulates the career development information that is out there among colleges and employers. So NACE defines career readiness as a foundation from which to demonstrate requisite core competencies that broadly prepare the college educated for success in the workplace as well as lifelong career management. So they have identified 8 different competencies. We're just going to briefly talk about these. So these are good for you to be aware of as well, because again, if you want to have that differentiating factor in an interview, or you want to, um, you know, capture some of this on a resume or in a LinkedIn profile, especially in your About Me section, you can express awareness of these and then give an example of how you've demonstrated them. So the first one is career and self-development. So this is where you display awareness of your own strengths and areas for development, as well as displaying curiosity and seeking out or actively seeking out opportunities to learn. So that's another big buzzword you'll hear a lot about in recent times is this curiosity element. And it can be huge. If you are able to show that you are a curious professional, someone who is curious always wants to know more. They're always open to learning additional information. So that career and self-development is a huge competency according to NACE. There is also communication. And so this is relating to employing active listening, persuasive communication, and influencing skills with respect to diversity of learning styles, varied individual communication abilities, and cultural differences. So this encompasses a bit of diversity and awareness and diversity as well. But I think it's important to put the emphasis on the active listening, persuasion, and influence. Those are very key areas of that particular competency. Then there's critical thinking, and this relates to basically making decisions and solving problems using sound, inclusive reasoning, and accurately summarizing and interpreting data with an awareness of personal biases that may impact outcomes. So in critical thinking, it's being aware of that sound decision-making process, basing your decisions on data and many times, but also being aware of how your own biases can impact your decision-making process. Then there is equity and inclusion. And a lot of times you will be asked an interview question related to this. They might ask you, tell me about a time when you worked with diverse populations, or what can you demonstrate in terms of how you have supported social justice? So this has to do with advocating for inclusion, equitable practices, justice and empowerment for historically marginalized groups, and seeking global cross-cultural and experience that enhance one's understanding of people from different demographic groups. So if you're part of any special interest groups with your employer, for example, that could be an example of some involvement with equity and inclusion. There's also leadership, which is probably not surprising. This has to do with using innovative thinking to go beyond traditional methods and motivating and inspiring. Those are the key words under this one: motivating and inspiring others by encouraging them and building mutual trust. Then there is professionalism, and this relates to maintaining a positive personal brand, which is in alignment with the organization and personal career values, and consistently meeting and exceeding expectations. So, just one area that is kind of a sensitive topic that taps into professionalism, but I think is important to mention. I worked with this a lot when I was working at Arizona State, especially with traditional age college students, more of the 18 to 22-year-olds. And a lot of times there were debates on what constituted professional appearance and dress. It's understandable that, you know, when we talk about dress, it's very individualized and appearance is very personalized. But when we all start talking about this concept of professionalism and interviewing, it is important to understand that a lot of times a company, when you're interviewing, is viewing you as the possible face of their company. So until you are given an opportunity to work with that institution and you're actually given the job offer, a lot of times it's better to, be overdressed professionally than underdressed. And it can be better to be a little bit more on the conservative side at times as well, because you're really trying to bridge that gap between your individualism and the culture of the company. So just something to think about there. Then there are also teamwork, or there's the teamwork aspect. This is effectively managing conflict, interacting with and respecting diverse personalities, and collaborating with others to achieve common goals. And then there's the technology part of this. And this really taps into using technology to improve efficiency and productivity with work and quickly adapting to new or unfamiliar technologies. So, those are what we call, again, the NACE career competencies that are recognized by the National Association of Colleges and Employers. And hopefully, you'll be able to see how these tie into emotional intelligence and then eventually SEL here. So, you'll hear EQ or emotional intelligence in a lot of circles, of course. And this really is about the ability to perceive emotions, to access and generate emotions so as to assist thought, also to understand emotions and emotional knowledge, and to reflectively regulate emotions to promote emotional intellectual growth. We have a lot of the word emotions in this, right, for emotional intelligence. So this is really about understanding your emotions and the emotions of those around you. It is also about knowing yourself and your feelings so well that you're able to manage them effectively at any moment and for any given situation. I think a lot of us are tested on this, especially recently. I know that after the recent election, we have a lot of emotions that are running high out there. And for a lot of folks, that is a test, right? Of my goodness, how do we, when we're feeling a certain way, how are we able to still perform at our jobs and still maintain professionalism and be able to regulate those emotions? That is part of emotional intelligence here. So this means working well under stress, handling working relationships in a personal yet professional manner, having appropriate boundaries, keeping a level head, and appreciating the emotional needs of yourself and others. And by the way, emotional intelligence is oftentimes something that you need to practice. Um, you know, for a lot of us, from the time we were children, we were not even processing a lot of our emotions. We were, told not to express negative emotions in many ways. So, in the last generation or so, I think we've been more comfortable to share and process emotions and be able to move forward with that. But for most people, again, it is a process. And when we feel like we're challenged or we're under stress a lot, this is where the real work can come into play um, to be able to maintain that emotional intelligence. So when we're talking about EQ specifically, there are 5 components of EQ. There, as you can see here, there's self-awareness, empathy, motivation, self-regulation, and then we do have social skills here. And these five key elements originated with Daniel Goleman back in 1995. He was an American psychologist, and I want to just briefly define each of these for you. So, self-awareness is that recognition of your own strengths and weaknesses, coupled with the ability to be conscious and understanding of your emotions, and not only being aware of your emotions, but also recognizing how your emotions impact others. Then we have the empathy component, and this is the ability to inspire, influence, and connect with others. You especially can see this in strong leaders, if you will. Working well in teams, managing conflict, and note and respond to others people's motivations and needs. Then we have motivation, and this has to do with being driven internally. So a lot of times employers like to see evidence of, you know, that self-motivation, that you're always looking one step ahead in your career, that you're always looking to continue that professional development, if you will. So this, rather than being driven by salary, which I mean, there's really nothing inherently wrong with that, but employers like to see a little bit more. They like to see that you're taking initiative and adapting to changing circumstances and environments as required. Then there is self-regulation, and this is the ability to manage your emotions in a healthy way, especially again when you're feeling challenged. Are you able to control those emotions? It is about expressing emotions in a useful, appropriate manner. And again, I think this is something that a lot of folks have been challenged with lately. I will just give a really quick side story and maybe a little even a cautionary tale to some folks out there. Another specialty area of mine is providing trainings on personal branding and how to use LinkedIn. And I've been doing trainings for probably since about 2011. And I remember back when we started, there was a lot of emphasis on, okay, LinkedIn is not Facebook. LinkedIn is all about professional presence, professional branding, and professional networking. In recent years, I have seen a lot of comments that might be political in nature and people expressing things that can be uh, it cannot reflect so well on your professional brand is my best way to say that. And again, we can all get triggered at certain times, but a way to demonstrate self-regulation is to be able to detach in those kinds of moments and avoid expressing those strong emotions, especially on LinkedIn, because believe it or not, that could cause an issue with you getting hired in the future if someone sees those kinds of things posted. So just something to think about. I've seen it's become more and more common for folks to express themselves that way. But again, I think it's important to remind yourself of the intention of LinkedIn and how that really is a reflect of your professional brand. Then lastly, we have social skills, and this is the ability to understand other people's emotions, needs, and concerns, pick up on emotional cues, feel comfortable socially. And we're not saying here that everyone has to be an extreme, extrovert, but being able to have those skills to be able to start out conversations, maintaining connections, recognizing the power dynamics in a group or organization to win others' respect and build rapport. So yeah, Sarita's mentioning here, or I'm sorry, Bobby is mentioning angry negative posts on Handshake. Yes, that's another thing to be aware of. And then as we're on that topic for a moment, signs of emotional intelligence and the cost of, not regulating your emotions. Um, in our department, since we are career and professional development, a lot of times we will be the recipient of an email of someone who received a notice from WGU HR that they are not being considered for a role that they applied for. And I have seen folks vent out their frustration in emails that they're sending to HR or to us, explaining how our system is flawed and how they can't believe they didn't even get an interview. It is fine to express those emotions in a safe place. And putting them in an email like that is usually not a good practice and can definitely backfire. It could prevent your opportunities for apply for being considered in the future. So you have to be very cautious of that. I mean, it's understandable that you're frustrated, but you really should be aware of the proper channels to utilize to express that frustration, because again, it can really impact that personal brand. So yeah, mentioned she saw the same things in HR. So that's all part of emotional intelligence. Um, so now we take this information, we take the NACE career competencies, we take the EQ and those dimensions, and then we look at what is called SEL, or social emotional learning. And again, there's a lot of overlap here, but when we're talking about SEL, it is, as you see here, a lifelong process of developing skills that contribute to academic and career success and overall individual and collective well-being. There are 5 domains here when we talk about SEL, and you're probably going to see that crossover with the EQ and the NACE career competencies. So we're going to delve deeper into these, but there are self-awareness, self-management, interpersonal communication, what we call executive function, and then lastly, social awareness. So these can be applied in, various areas of your lives. So not just in the workplace, but our relationships with people at home, in the community, the greater society as well. So some of you may have seen this slide before. I know it's been shared throughout WGU, but this is basically a map here of our 5 areas and some of those skills that fall underneath each of these. So an important distinction here about, sometimes we get the question, okay, aren't a lot of these what we call soft skills as well? There is some similarity when we talk about power skills and what we call soft or transferable skills. But how power skills are different is that power skills are oftentimes much more versatile and applicable across various contexts. So, for example, while soft skills are often situational, so conflict resolution is one that comes to mind. So conflict resolution skills might only come into play during a disagreement or disagreements, where power skills are foundational capabilities that informed every aspect of an employee's performance. So take critical thinking for an example. This power skill isn't just about solving a complex problem. It's about approaching every task, every interaction, all decisions with a thoughtful, analytical mindset. An employee with strong critical thinking skills will not only excel at their technical tasks, but they'll also be better equipped to navigate office politics, contribute to strategic discussions, and adapt to changing business conditions. It's also worth noting that the rise of power skills does not negate the value of those traditional soft skills like leadership, um, collaboration, oral and written communication skills, problem solving. Rather, it builds upon and expands them in terms of power skills, um, creating a more comprehensive and nuanced understanding of workplace competencies. So, communication skills, for instance, are still crucial, but in the power skills paradigm, they're viewed as part of a broader set of capabilities that include not just your typical, when you think of like oral and written communication, it's also digital communication, cross-cultural fluency, and the ability to translate complex ideas across different domains. So a little side comment on that last phrase, the ability to translate complex ideas across different domains. A lot of times I'll talk to people that will say they're making a career pivot. So they're going from one area to maybe a completely different domain. I get a lot of people that are making career pivots into IT, for example. Some are former teachers, some might have been involved in real estate, and they might say, you know what, I have no idea if I have any skills that are really applicable to IT. Honestly, that last phrase, the ability to translate complex ideas across different domains, you do that as a teacher, you do that as a realtor, a property manager, and you do that in IT. So that is a part of communication that is actually very powerful. And if you're able to articulate that properly, excuse me, on a resume in an interview, you'll be able to show employers that you are aware that you do have these skills that can translate and translate very well. So just something to think about there. So when we're talking about these 5 domains of power skills, the first one we're going to talk about here is self-awareness. And what this really relates to is it's the foundational building block for effective social and emotional learning, positive psychology, personal growth, and professional development. It's the conscious and clear perception and understanding of our own personality, our feelings, our thoughts, our emotions, our beliefs, our strengths and weaknesses, as well as our character and motivation. The more we are self aware, the better we can understand other people's perceptions, attitudes, and mindsets. A lot of times when you have blind spots, that can impact how you interact with others and how successful you're able to be or what kind of challenges you might face in the professional arena. So that first one is describing self-awareness, and you'll see things in that category like self-compassion, optimism, mindfulness, gratitude. Next, we have what's called self-management. So we have the self-awareness, then we go to the self-management, and this is the ability to accept responsibility, be accountable for, and effectively manage our thoughts, behaviors, and emotions. Self-management skills are critical for getting things done and taking control of our lives. They utilize strategies and mindsets that help us become organized, efficient, most effective in our work. Self-management is the roadmap for our personal and professional success. Interpersonal communication to build strong personal and professional relationships is under this area. So you'll see here like self-management includes things like that, internal self-motivation, goal setting, discipline, time management, impulse control, that attention to detail. Those are all key to that particular domain. Then we have interpersonal communication. And this really, the heart of this is all the tools to build and maintain healthy relationships. So under this category, you'll see everything from, compassion to that active listening skill, effective conflict resolution, the relationship building, verbal and written communication falls under this category. Leadership and leading teams, if you will, and mentoring are all in that category. Then you hear a lot about executive function or executive functioning, and this is the higher order mental processes that enable us to manage complex tasks such as organizing and planning, remembering information, problem solving, regulating emotions, controlling cognitive flexibility. Executive function skills are essential to our ability for critical thinking, adapting to change, and persistence. Developing our executive function skills contributes to our ability to make responsible decisions and achieve our goals. So you can see under this category everything from the skill of critical thinking, problem solving, being adaptable, mentally agile, showing academic tenacity, which, by the way, you as a WGU student or graduate, honestly, Pursuing a competency-based degree is quite challenging for a lot of folks and does show academic tenacity. One reason for that is that you have to be self-directed to be successful with completing a degree with us. You don't have that instructor right in front of you at all times. So you have to be able to show that you are able to weather challenges and you are able to really progress independently with your degree. That definitely can fall under executive function. Planning and organizing. And remember in the beginning, we talked about, curiosity. That falls under executive function. The sense of agency, creativity. Then lastly, we have the social awareness. And this is really essential for adapting to diverse workplace environments and communities. So these skills will allow us to engage, react, and respond in a variety of social situations through understanding the complex needs of others. Socially aware people can appropriately modify their behavior and apply effective interpersonal communication strategies to achieve the most optimal outcomes in a variety of social contexts. So, this is especially important for leaders, I would say, that supervise people. Having an understanding of what your team needs to be successful, what their strengths are, what their challenges are, would really be essential for you to be a strong leader because how you communicate with one team member might be very different than how you might communicate to another. You may need to adapt your style to be able to connect with them, and so you have to have that awareness. You have to have that empathy. You also need to have a lot of times cultural awareness, depending on who your team members are, to really understand the best way to communicate with them. So this is where you'll see, like we said, the empathy, responsibility to others, ethical responsibility, the appreciation for diversity, and also civic identity. So that's an overview of the 5 different areas and what we're going to do next. And like I said, this is a very informal assessment I would like you to do. I'm going to introduce this to you and then I'm going to go back to the previous slide because it's I notice it's a little harder to see these on this slide, the individual skills below each domain. What I would like you to do, and I'm going to give you probably just a couple minutes to go through and assess for yourself when you go through each domain. So, for example, if we're looking at self awareness, I would like you to, again, we can't spend too much time on this, but put an S next to any of these that you feel like are strengths of yours, and then O for any area that you think might be an area to work on or an opportunity. So, going back to that previous slide, for example, like if you're going through self awareness and you're thinking, growth mindset, when I experience a challenge, I've become pretty good at being able to process it and see what the lesson is from that rather than getting stuck on the challenge or the mistake I might have made. So for that, you might just put an S next to growth mindset. Mindfulness, how readily are you able to be in the present moment? Some techniques that you've used. Self-efficacy, how readily available is that to you to be able to showcase that self-reliance, if you will, self-confidence, etc. So again, this is very informal. I just like you to take a moment or two because the idea behind this is for you to get an overall sense based on your own self-assessment here. What are your top domains out of these 5 and what maybe are some areas to work on? So like I said, I'm just going to give you about a minute or two to sift through quickly. You can write down, you can make a list if you want, or you can just do like a quick category. You can do self-awareness and then just write an S or O down the line for each of these. Next category, self-management, S or O for each. So that you can just get an assessment of where are my top areas that tend to be my strengths and what are areas that I can work on. So like I said, I'll give you a moment or two to kind of quickly sift through this and see what you think. And again, this is all from your perspective and your current level of awareness. So there can be a bit of a bias there, but I think that it is a good way for you to just pause for a moment and say, okay, what have I worked on? What have I done pretty well with? And what are some areas that maybe I don't know as much about or things that I could work on? Okay, I know that time kind of went a little quickly here, but if you can just maybe get an overall sense of maybe the S's and the O's that you wrote down here, and get a sense of those categories where maybe you had the most S's, and consider those would be your stronger areas. And maybe just doing a quick scan and identifying those areas that could be opportunities for growth. And then as you determine that, if you can get a sense of for these domains, which would be your top, maybe you have a tie, but what would be your top one or your top two? And then what would be your area, your greatest area for opportunity? Is anybody willing to share in the chat what your, like you might just want to put strength and then whichever domains came up for you as your strongest, and then your opportunity, whichever area you might want to work on the most. Okay, so Bobby, thank you for sharing. Lots of O's in interpersonal communication. Okay, that's really good self-awareness. I just took this one again myself in my area for working on is self-management for opportunity, and then social awareness, I would say, is probably my strongest. Okay, so Randy mentioned, yep, self-management weak is executive function strength. Excellent. Okay, and Bobby mentioned also mostly S's in self-awareness. Okay, except for self-confidence. Very good insight. Yeah, so the idea behind this is again to get you to understand what the five domains are, what some of those skills are underneath each, and then get it just kind of do that self-assessment of what might be your strong areas and then what areas to work on. And now what we want to talk about is ways to build up some of these power skills. So when we're looking at each of these, once again, those five domains, even if you understand what emotional intelligence is or social emotional learning, you might find it difficult to apply that knowledge in your life. In order to permanently change and or improve your emotional intelligence, or again, SEL, social emotional learning, you will need to not only build your emotional and social awareness, but also learn to manage your relationships and develop personal and social competence. So when looking at this, when we're looking at developing the social awareness specifically and the self-management, doing things like, when's the last time that you were really in tune to what you were experiencing emotionally when listening to others? Some of us, I think, might be better at this than others, or some might be more practiced at this. And sometimes we're more focused on, okay, when we're listening to others, what are we going to say next? Instead of really being in that moment and observing, what are we feeling? Also, ways to develop that self awareness and self management, connecting with your emotions and understanding how emotions influence thoughts and actions. Like I said, a lot of us, myself included, were brought up in a time when, you know, stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about is what we used to say all the time. And you don't do things like express anger or sent to your room when you did that, right? So a lot of us, there's a lot of reprogramming that has to happen to be able to identify how we're feeling, understand it, and process it. Also, adapt or adding strategies to reduce stress and work with difficult emotions in the moment. You might have heard of that. There was the old basic one, count to five when you're feeling a certain way. Or when a meeting is getting really heated, just excuse yourself if you need to for a couple of moments to take a breather. I mean, it's much better to take that pause than to react in a way that you might regret later on. Adapting to changing circumstances and being aware of ways to maintain self motivation. I talk to a lot of students and alumni who are experiencing burnout in their current employment, or they make a career pivot and they don't realize how many hours they're going to have to put in, and they're really stressed and they want to get out of that situation as soon as possible. That's understandable, but you also want to be able to take a step back and see, do you take a calculated move before reacting on impulse or before having a complete understanding of all the factors involved in a career change. And again, maintaining that self motivation, that can be really challenging at times. But what are some ways that you can connect to your values in the work that you do, for example? What are some things that you're excited about learning? And can you incorporate those into your professional development? Consider a personal organization system. Some people, for me, it's using, Microsoft Outlook calendar is what I use a lot to document things. Other folks will use different kinds of apps depending on what they're comfortable with. If you're having trouble staying on top of some of those things that you have to complete, really consider utilizing a different system, if you will. And also, emotional health, when we talk about this whole concept of emotional health, it comes from reconnecting to your core emotions, accepting them, and becoming comfortable with them. So it's a really important process, as we said earlier. And then incorporating growth mindset can also be helpful with those domains. So, we hear about growth mindset a lot, and you hear about, being able to take a challenge and see the opportunity in it, or taking something that was perceived as a failure and taking the lesson away from it. How are you able to move on, be a stronger professional, or be a stronger person? And also, how do you utilize self-talk in the workplace when receiving feedback or constructive criticism. So this slide here demonstrates the whole self-talk that can occur, and we have what's called the inner critic, where some folks tend to blame whatever goes wrong in their lives on themselves when it might, not be entirely their fault or their fault at all. So, something goes wrong and they said, well, if I wouldn't have done X, then Y would not have happened, right? Or there's the inner defender, which is the opposite of the critic. This is where it's everyone else's fault that's going on. Something is going on around them when that might not be accurate. Or there's what we call the inner guide, which really promotes growth mindset. So this is seeking to make the best of any situation. Um, you know, Asking yourself, am I on or off course for success right now? If I'm off course, what can I do to get back on course for what I want and how to get to where I want to go? Rather than being stuck on pointing the blame at yourself or others, again, what's the lesson? How can I get back to where I want to be is a great way to frame this. And then in terms of developing interpersonal communication or expanding that, becoming aware of how to effectively use nonverbal communication. So nonverbal communication is essentially sending emotional signals through the muscles in your face, the posture of your body. It is important to recognize the kind of nonverbal messages we send to others in order to improve our emotional relationships. For example, I've had friends and colleagues say that people have told them that they have a very angry look on their face when they're just intently listening. That can be perceived a certain way by people. Or if their arms are crossed all the time, that doesn't necessarily provide an open arena for open communication. So it can be hard to recognize these things in ourselves, but it's important if we really want to work on these kinds of skills. Or humor and laughter, honestly, these are huge to me. When you're stressed, you have trouble keeping things in perspective. So any way you can, bring about a laugh, it does ease up your nervous system. It can sharpen your mind, help you to calm down. Working in a virtual environment, my teammates and I a lot of times will share just silly memes or what have you, and it can make a big difference in terms of building and maintaining connections on our team. Or viewing conflict as an opportunity. Conflicts help us build relationships when we see conflict as an opportunity to grow closer to others. Learn to view conflict positively as a method to build feelings of freedom, creativity, and safety in your relationships. So this is important to keep in mind. I know that when I first started my career, I really hated conflict, but I was able to really see the value if you're able to work through that. And I know we're getting short on time. There's just a couple other things I want to point out to you here. So if you're wondering about this next concept, it's called compassionate curiosity. And there is a gentleman that came up with this concept, and he has a really great podcast out there. You can just look up Compassionate Curiosity Podcast, and it will likely come up. His name is Kwame Christian, and he has this three-step process of working through conflict by using compassionate curiosity. So it's about acknowledging and validating emotions of yourself and others, getting curious with compassion rather than entering a conflict with, getting defensive or, pointing out someone's words and throwing them back at them. It's, hey, can you tell me a little bit more about that? I heard, I hear that you're frustrated. Tell me a little bit more about that. And really taking a curious standpoint, that puts a little bit of a detachment between you and the strong emotions that could be happening. And then the third step in this is engaging in joint problem solving. So again, he has a really great podcast on this, and I recommend that you take a look. His name again is Kwame Christian, and it goes into more detail on that whole process. And then gratitude. Gratitude is contagious. Gratitude, is definitely like a muscle you can build in your body. The more you use it, the easier it comes up. So doing things like keeping a gratitude journal. This could relate to your professional endeavors or just your daily life. Um, expressing what you're thankful for. When you go out to a restaurant, this may sound minimal, but it really can make a difference in the relationships that you build and maintain. When you get together with friends or family, I think it can be common for us to get together and say, oh, I've had such a horrible day. and jump into all the negatives. But maybe make it a point for you to start out when you're meeting with friends and family with, hey, what went well today? Tapping into higher power can also be a way to really access some gratitude from time to time. Then developing that executive functioning, curiosity again, taking a curious approach to learning. Maybe be able to give an example of that in an interview when somebody asks you the question, tell me about how you stay current in your field. You can talk about being eternally curious and maybe give an example of that is a great way to do that. Or look for opportunities for professional development. Talk to your supervisor, talk to colleagues about opportunities to expand your skills. Document ways which you have demonstrated adaptability and mental agility, be a great practice. Maybe conduct a personal SWOT analysis. There are worksheets out there that you can seek that help you to write. Do your own personal strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. That can give you huge insight into executive functioning. Or do a 360-degree evaluation at work where you ask for feedback from others. For developing social awareness, learn to look for ways to determine how others are feeling, being more in tune with the words they're saying, but also their expressions, especially if you tend to be the person that does more of the talking. Maybe take a step back and try to do more of the listening. Incorporate empathy and understanding the feeling that feelings have causes. Again, for some people, this doesn't come as naturally, so it might be more of a skill to work on. Putting yourself in other shoes and seeing how you would feel. Engaging in ethical decision making. Thinking of ways that you could tangibly demonstrate cultural awareness and appreciation for diversity. Once again, especially in interviews. If you can come up with an example to talk about that, that can be a differentiating factor. And then just as we're closing here, just really quickly, I want to show you, these are some statistics about the importance of possessing strong EQ and SEL power skills, especially in a time of when AI has become more prominent. 81% of employers believe in prioritizing skills over degrees. So a lot of times our students will get fixated on, do I have the right degree? But a lot of times it's skills and more of those SEO factors that can come into hiring. You'll see also, 82% of employers said that soft skills are just as important as technical skills when making those hiring decisions. And 70% of the most requested skills in more than 82 million job postings fall into the durable or transferable category. You will also see, again, when we talk about the age of AI, the increase in AI and automation makes EQ skills much more desirable and necessary. Also, the increase in remote and hybrid jobs, same thing. The importance of teamwork and collaboration due to an ever increasing global economy, and of course the rapidly changing nature of work. Being able to show adaptability and that inner motivation and be able to manage your career are all essential for you to be a strong professional. So in closing, once again, we talked about that 30-day challenge. So we're looking at December the 6th. I encourage you to write down 3 next steps that you're willing to take based on this information that you learned. Maybe you have decided to, after doing that informal SEL power skill domain, you're going to work on self-awareness and maybe take a couple of the strategies we talked about. Or maybe you're going to look up more about compassionate curiosity and that way of conflict resolution. Or, maybe you are going to do a personal SWOT analysis. These are all good strategies that you can implement. See if there's an accountability buddy that you can also enlist and see if you were successful. And just a really quick overview of what we do in our office. So everything from resume reviews, cover letter reviews, LinkedIn profile reviews. These are all primarily done by email, and more information on that can be found on our website of how to submit your documents and go through the review process. We also hold individual appointments on everything from career decision making to mock or practice interviewing to key resources to get additional experience, etc. And we do offer, like you see today, workshops that are hosted through Handshake and different events. And we also have a callback service. So if you need more immediate assistance from us, if you call the number that is under our phone number here and you leave a message during our normal business hours, we will return your call within 24 business hours and be able to assist you. So at this point, No, we're a couple minutes over, so I apologize for that. But just seeing if there's any last minute questions or comments. Once again, you all will be sent a copy of this recording as well as the PowerPoint to access in the future. And if you do have to hop, thank you so much for joining us today. And again, hopefully this gave you some ideas of, what are SEL power skills? Where might you lie in your strengths and opportunities? And what you might want to work on, because again, this really can be a differentiating factor for your hiring. So thinking about ways you can talk about how you have demonstrated that cultural awareness, that lifelong learning, for example, these are really great keys. So you are all welcome. Thank you again for attending today. Thank you. I hope this was valuable and gives you some things to think about. Right. So everyone have a good day and take care. Have a good evening.